religion is a misguidance, and all misguidance is going astray, and all going astray is in the hellfire. We ask Allah.
This is a recent sermon at the Al-Madina Dawah Centre in Western Sydney.
But being that we are witnessing and seeing everything that is happening and unfolding in the Middle East, in Gaza, at the hands of Banu Israel, the Yahud, the Jews.
The speaker, Abu Ousayd, is reciting parables about the deaths of Jewish people.
Towards the end of times, when the Muslims will be fighting the Jews, the trees will speak, the stone will speak, and they'll say, "O Muslim, O believer, there is a Yahudi behind me, come and kill him."
His sermon is riddled with anti-Semitism. He laments the involvement of Jewish people in business, saying they've weaponised their wealth against the weak, parroting the same lie about Jews that fueled the Nazis and centuries of persecution, the unfounded claim Jews are plotting to take over the world via banking and the media.
And this still continues today, where we find the majority of banks are owned by the Jews, who are happy to give people loans knowing that it's almost impossible to pay it back. So this is what they took up in Al-Madina. But as we said,
Ousayd has been preaching hate in one way or another for the better part of a decade. What's different is his name. Before he appeared in videos calling for the eradication of Jewish people, he was better known as Wissam Haddad. A bookstore operated by Haddad in Sydney's West around 2012 became something of an unofficial headquarters for extremist preachers. There, young Australians of Muslim faith, mostly men and teenage boys, were recruited to travel to Syria illegally, where they took up the Islamic State cause. Haddad's own passport was cancelled by Australian authorities years ago due to his involvement with the group. Now the police are poking around again. That's because Haddad's anti-Semitic sermon isn't the first to come out of the Al-Madina Dawah Centre. On October 7, a preacher identified only as Brother Ishmael delivered an equally inflammatory sermon.
If the Australian government like it or not, if the ASIO likes it or not, if they want to deport me from Australia or not, the jihad is the solution for the ummah.
As we put in our editorial on Monday's edition, it was some of the most inflammatory and I guess insightful comments aimed at Jewish people, aimed at the people of Israel, that probably we've seen, especially over the last month or so.
Alexei Dimitriadi is the Australian's New South Wales political reporter.
You can see him get up in the hall of the Al-Madina Dawah Centre in traditional Islamic dress to what appears to be a pretty large crowd, and with children there as well. In English, he gives this almost 45-minute sermon. Among a lot of things he says, he encourages Muslims across the world to wage in jihad. He calls jihad the solution for Muslims. He says that Muslims everywhere across the world, inclusive of Australia, and I'm quoting him here, are very looking forward to joining the Mujahideen.
Muslims, they starving for jihad. Their hearts are aching for jihad. They can't wait to be amongst the Mujahideen.
But the other thing he talks about, and he takes aim at Australia and Australians in general, calls the Prime Minister a hypocrite. He said Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has his mask of hypocrisy slipped. And by that he meant the federal government's support of Israel's right to defend itself.
Well, this is an abhorrent attack on Israel. Must stop. Israel has a right to defend itself, which is what it is doing.
Brother Ishmael's comments are being investigated by police after they were first reported by Alexei in The Australian. In a video posted to YouTube on Tuesday purporting to be explaining the earlier video, Haddad and Brother Ishmael sit on a sofa with an interviewer at the Al-Madina Dawah Centre. Haddad gets right to the point, casting doubt on the October 7 massacre by Hamas of up to 1,400 Israeli civilians, including babies.
No one really has seen footage. There's been, first there was claims that there was 40 babies that were beheaded, and then there was no proof. So how can we believe a people that are known to be liars?
This is Wissam Haddad.
So even the proof that they have brought, and that they've showed some images of burnt bodies, there's still an ongoing investigation that even the Israeli government itself, the IDF, fired at its own civilians, and it fired at those who were doing this raid, killing everybody. So is it friendly gunfire? No one can confirm.
Brother Ishmael pops up in this video too. He says he's been misinterpreted by the media, who are, you guessed it, controlled by the Jews.
We're not against the Jews. We're against the Zionist movement that basically trying to legalize what's illegal in the international law system, which is basically legalizing the illegal settlement in one of the lands of the Muslims.
He says Hamas, a proscribed terrorist group that has publicised its massacre of Israeli civilians, are not terrorists.
Hamas, they're not exercising terrorism on nobody. Hamas basically got established to defend the Palestinian land and to kick out the illegal settlers and occupants of this land. So they basically freedom fighters. So why do you call them terrorists? Because they defend the civilians that you're killing day and night by bombing them until now? Why are they terrorists? They can't even document one incident where Hamas was brutal to an innocent civilian.
Wenn es dem internationalen Finanzjudentum in und außerhalb Europas gelingen sollte.
In January 1939, shortly before invading Poland and triggering World War II, Adolf Hitler made a speech to Germany's parliament, the Reichstag, warning the conflict was being fanned by something he called the International Finance Jury, and warning the war would result in the annihilation of the Jewish race in Europe.
Sondern die Vernichtung der jüdischen Rasse in Europa.
Hitler's language came straight from a fabricated document that came out of Russia in the early 20th century. It was called the Protocol of the Elders of Zion, and it purported to be a secret plan cooked up by Jews to take over the world through the banking system. It was all lies, but it led directly to Hitler's murder of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust, which in turn led to the United Nations decision to create Israel as a homeland for Europe's displaced Jews after the war. Persecution of Jewish people has been going on for millennia. In Europe, it was fuelled by the fact churches banned Christians from money lending, which meant anyone netting a loan went to the Jewish community for finance. The most famous example of this in popular culture is William Shakespeare's 1596 play The Merchant of Venice, whose central figure is Shylock, a Jewish moneylender who demands the debtor give him a pound of his own flesh when he can't repay his debt. Shylock is ruthless and cruel and ultimately outsmarted by the Christians in the play. But Shakespeare's immortal prose also gives Shylock one of literature's most powerful denunciations of discrimination. Here's American actor Al Pacino playing Shylock in a characteristically Pacino, energetic performance.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? And if you wrong us, shall we not revenge?
After Israel was created in 1948 by dividing up land formerly claimed by colonial Britain, the Palestinians who lived in the region were largely displaced. As Israel's Arab neighbours, including Egypt and Jordan, attacked Israel in a dispute over its proposed borders, many Palestinians ended up in the tiny strip of land now known as Gaza. More wars ensued, and Hamas rose as the most violent arm of Palestinian politics, masterminding suicide bombings and terrorist attacks on Israel. In 2007, Hamas triumphed at local elections and has ruled Gaza ever since, even though there haven't been free and fair elections. Hamas grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood, a pre-World War II organisation in Egypt, which, just like Hitler, was profoundly influenced by the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Hamas's charter, written in 1988, defines itself as leading Islamic resistance against Jews and calls for the destruction of Israel.
We've gone through a lot of those videos, hours of footage that he's posted, and there are views and messages conveyed where I think it's quite clearly anti-Semitic as opposed to being anti-Israel or anti-Israeli government. The sentence about if Muslims spit on Israel, all the Jews will drown and die, I think that's quite hard to read that one in any other light than it being anti-Semitic and aimed at Jewish people.
Alexi Dimitriadi is The Australian's New South Wales political reporter. Thanks for joining us on The Front. You can see those videos and read all our reporting and analysis of the war in the Middle East, plus all the nation's best news, sport, business and politics, right now at theaustralian.com.au.